Okay, so now we're going to talk about what's called anosum root rot, or sometimes referred to as Heterobasidion root disease. So anosum root rot is a very common disease that affects conifers. It affects actually conifers worldwide. This is a disease that can affect pines here in the southeastern U.S., but it can also affect spruce and fir in Europe, and it can affect pines in other parts of the world as well. So it's a disease, a very important disease globally, and again, very, very important commercially. So this is a disease that affects the roots. And the way that, well, the pathogen, Heterobasidion, there's actually a couple different species depending on whether it's affecting pines or whether it's affecting spruce and fir. But the disease that affects, or the pathogen that affects pines here in the southeast is Heterobasidion irregulare, and the fungus is pretty interesting. It actually infects generally cut stumps or wounded roots, or if you have a broken off tree, things like that. And then it will move through the root system to adjacent trees. And so you get these pockets of mortality. So you'll have trees, one tree will die, and then it'll move from the roots of that tree to through the soil, through contact to adjacent trees. And so you get pockets of mortality, and through that process over time, you can have pretty quickly, within a few years, you can have large numbers of trees dying. And in particular, this is related to silviculture through management. So when we thin stands to reduce the density of trees, we artificially create a lot of opportunities for infection because we leave those cut stumps. And so that means that within 2 or 3 years after thinning, we can have in an ideal situation for this disease, we can have 30% or more disease incidence in a stand, and then very rapidly after that, we can have even worse conditions. So that's why this disease can be really, really important economically. So the fungus, to identify the disease, the signs and symptoms, well, when it infects the roots of when it infects the trees, what it does is it causes the cambium under the bark to die, and so in the roots you can see resinosis if you pull the roots up, but often it'll cause decay of the roots too. And so if we have roots that we pull up, if we look carefully, we'll see that they actually are sort of decayed, and we see this white rot in the roots, and the white rot becomes more extensive over time, and you can see that in this piece of stem tissue or root tissue here, that you get this what's called pocket rot, and it becomes real soft and has lost strength. Now, once the fungus is established, it produces these fruiting bodies that are very characteristic. They're very close to the ground, usually in the duff layer, and they have sort of a margin that is sort of white, as you can see here, and the cap is light tan and a little bit velvety in texture. And on the underside is light tan, and you can see the pores. And these are usually produced in the south. They're usually produced in the winter time. And they then produce spores, which can, like I said, can infect the stumps of trees. So above ground, really, it's slow mortality of the trees, and it's occurring in this pattern that matches with one tree and then adjacent trees that are dying, and usually it's in relation to that thinning process that you see. And so the primary things that you're going to know, you need to know for this disease to identify it, though, is really you want to look for these fruiting bodies to, in the stand. You want to go and see if you can find these. They're characteristic. You want to look for roots that are rotten, that have white pocket rot or white rot associated with them, maybe some resinosis on the roots. You want to rule out other things that might cause pocket rot, things like bark beetles and things that might be associated with pocket rot as well. But that's the primary identifying features for anosum root rot, or what's also referred to as Heterobasidion root disease.